Sego suaguego otquanolado Lolo Youngets. Hello everyone. My name is Ken Jock. I'm the tribal sub-chief for the St. Regis Mohawk tribe. I'm also past Environment Division Director for the St. Regis Mohawk tribe for 31 years. I welcome everybody here to this virtual conference, Climate Change Adaptation Symposium. I would like to say a few words of opening prayer. It's something that Oklahoma Mohawk people like to do traditionally whenever there's a gathering, whenever there's a meeting, whenever there are important matters to be discussed. We do this opening prayer to acknowledge the natural world, all the gifts that are provided and given to us as human beings also. So we'd like to open with that. Start out with the people. Today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. The next, we acknowledge the Earth Mother. We are all thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet we walk about as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. To our Mother, we send greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The waters. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms. Waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the spirit water. Now our minds are one. The fish, Gajansua. We turn our minds to all the fish life in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water. They also give themselves to us as food. We are grateful that we can still find pure water. So we turn now to the fish and send our greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The plants. Now we turn towards the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eye can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing plant life for many generations to come. Now our minds are one. The food plants. With one mind, we turn to honor and thank all of the food plants we harvest from the gardens. Since the beginning of time, the grains, vegetables, beans, and berries have helped the people survive. Many other living things draw strength from them. We gather all the plant foods together as one and send them a greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. Medicine herbs. Now we turn to all the medicine herbs of the world. From the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness. They are always waiting and ready to help us. We are happy they are still among us, as these special few who remember how to use the plants for healing. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the medicines, to the keepers, and to the keepers of the medicines. Now our minds are one. The animals. We gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animals' life in the world. They have many things to teach us as people. We see them near our homes and in the deep forests. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it will always be so. Now our minds are one. The trees. Now we turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Some provide us with shelter and shade, others with fruit, beauty, and other useful things. Many peoples of the world use a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree of life. Now our minds are one. The birds, we put our minds together as one and thank all the birds who move and fly above and about us. The Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. Voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. They help to bring the change of the seasons. From the four directions they come, bringing us messengers and giving us strength. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the four winds. Now our minds are one. The thunders. Now we turn to the west where our grandfathers, the thunder beings, live. With lightning and thundering voices, they bring with them the water that renews life. We bring our minds together as one to send greetings and thanks to our grandfathers, the thunders. Now our minds are one. The sun. We now send our greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day, without fail, he travels the sky from east to west, bringing the light of a new day. He is the source of all the fires of life. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our brother, the sun. Now our minds are one. Grandmother Moon. We put our minds together and give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon who lights the nighttime sky. She is the leader of the women all over the world, and she governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face, we measure time, and it is the moon who watches over the arrival of children here on earth. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our grandmother, the moon. Now our minds are one. The stars. We give thanks to the stars who are spread across the sky like jewelry. We see them in the night, helping with the moon to light the darkness and bringing dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they guide us home. With our minds gathered together as one, we send greetings and thanks to all the stars. Now our minds are one. The enlightened teachers. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now our minds are one. The Creator. We turn our thoughts to the Creator, Great Spirit, and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on this Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to the Creator. Now our minds are one. So this is the opening prayer. We often recite before a large gathering or before an important meeting. I'm looking forward to the very valuable and important discussions that will be coming up. I believe we all know that the time for action is now. We see every day something in the news about climate change, extreme weather conditions, disasters, all of the impacts from the climate change that's all around us now. So there's no question of that. I think we're on the right track, and you're doing a good thing by looking at adaptation. And I'm confident that we're going to find ways to deal with all of the extreme weather and the conditions that are going on in the world now. We have to use our divine creativity, open ourselves up, and share and collaborate, work together to find common solutions to the problems that we're faced with now. So, Nawakoa, thank you very much for this opportunity to open the meeting. And I wish everybody a very productive and fruitful next 2 days. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to Sub-Chief Jock for that opening prayer. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center Symposium. My name is Bethany Bradley, and I'm one of the co-directors of CASC here at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And I'm really excited to get us started. So here at CASC, our mission is to deliver science to help fish, wildlife, ecosystems, and cultural resources adapt to a changing climate. And we think we have a pretty great model for how we do that. So in the sessions today and tomorrow, you'll see lots of examples of engaged science. Or that is science that is not only responsive to manager needs, but is also bringing lots of voices together to participate from the start of the scientific process. You'll also see a lot of outstanding graduate student and postdoctoral fellows. So we're super proud of their work and their dedication to the larger mission. And we think you're going to be impressed by this next generation of climate adaptation scientists and managers. And then lastly, you're also going to see lots of cutting edge science that's actively solving problems. So we're really glad that you've joined us and hope that you'll be an active participant throughout the symposium. We want to be doing science in partnership with you, so please don't be shy about telling us what you need. To start our program, we'd first like to share a lands acknowledgement that's paired with a video showing a map of the homelands and seascapes of First Nations. The map shows federal and state recognized tribes, as well as Indigenous First Nation communities, which are marked in black text. And then in blue text are the locations of any CASC consortium institutions. And the video will zoom and pan during the presentation so that we can explore together. And in the chat, we're also going to share a link to the map so that you can explore on your own. The lands acknowledgement will be delivered by Thornbrugh, John Woodruff, and Katherine Smith. Casey is the United South and Eastern Tribes and CASC Tribal Resilience Liaison, as well as a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. John Woodruff is the CASC University co-director, and Katherine Smith is the CASC federal director. Casey?
Winnie Matopon, good morning. As part of the introduction to this symposium, we'd like to offer an acknowledgement to the First Nations of this land and region served by the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. And we would also like to say why we are doing this acknowledgement. The United States and its federal agencies, including the Department of the Interior's Regional Climate Adaptation Science Centers, have a trust and treaty obligation to support tribal nation governments and programs. We must acknowledge that the trust and treaty obligation exists because tribal nations either ceded, often under deception and violence, or were forced from unceded lands, amounting to millions of acres of land and natural resources to what would become the United States. Tribal land cessations often occurred via treaties with European colonies and later the United States, and was often involuntary and out of necessity as Indigenous peoples made decisions to protect our families, to protect our communities, and to secure fractions of our original homelands or to maintain some connection to homelands for which we were forced from. These ceded lands, these ceded and unceded lands and natural resources are the source of and the very foundation of the wealth and power that the United States and its citizens enjoy to this day. In exchange, the United States federal government made promises via treaties and the acknowledgement of the sovereign status of tribal nations to respect a nation-to-nation relationship with tribal nations and to ensure resources to support the health, overall well-being, and prosperity of tribal nations. This means in the space of adapting to long-term climate change, it is important that long-term and sustained efforts to support tribal nations are developed and continued. We must acknowledge that most Americans are not informed on tribal sovereignty and of the trust and treaty obligation to tribal nations unless they specifically work for or work with tribal nation governments or organizations. This also remains true in the climate change adaptation space. As a result, research priorities are not always informed of tribal nation landscapes, seascapes, histories, and contemporary issues and concerns. In the climate change adaptation space, the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center, also known as the Northeast CASC, has continued a formal partnership with United South and Eastern Tribes, as well as with the Bureau of Indian Affairs Tribal Climate Resilience Program, as well as a continued working partnership with the Northeast Indigenous Climate Resilience Network in order to engage tribal nations and connect with tribal programs in the Northeast. The Northeast CASC is working to build its engagement with tribal nations through the participation of its leaders, scientists, and staff in trainings such as the United South and Eastern Tribes Tribal Climate Adaptation Plan writing retreats and climate resilience camps. In moving forward, the goal of tribal engagement is not only the informational support for tribal climate resilience, but also support for the participation of tribal scientists, traditional knowledge keepers, tribal agencies, and communities in the framing of climate adaptation research priorities, ethical and respectful methods and approaches, as well as support for the next generation of tribal scientists, scholars, and allies for climate adaptation planning and implementation. Kataptanamu, and I'll hand it over to Director John Woodruff.
With this map, we acknowledge that the homelands and seascapes of the First Nations cover the entire region of the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. Indigenous First Nations are the first and longtime stewards of this land and have sustained deep connections with this land since time immemorial. The first languages of this land are the languages of Indigenous nations. The first science of this land stem from the knowledge of Indigenous peoples. The first ethical systems and human moral codes of this land are built from the values of Indigenous peoples. American education, while capturing international genocide and injustice, does not often acknowledge the painful history of an Indigenous people during colonialism in North America. Many people have little awareness of the immense cultural trauma, loss, and grief associated with this history. American education also has not adequately acknowledged the strength, resolve, and resilience of Indigenous people and First Nations. While colonists seceded from European nations to begin new nations on this continent, such as the United States, Canada, and Mexico, Indigenous peoples have fought to maintain their nations and the survival of future generations, often at great sacrifice. We display here on this map the names of federally recognized tribes, state recognized tribes, and Indigenous communities that we are aware of. Our intent is to be inclusive, but we may be missing some communities and welcome feedback to improve our understanding. The blue text marks the consortium institutions of the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. We hope that this will help orient you to the existing tribal nations and communities in your home or study area and invite you to explore the stories of those communities and their relationship to this land. Not shown here, but highlighted by large blank spaces on this map are many tribal nations and communities that left their homelands due to violence, threats of violence, or forced removal. There are several federally recognized tribes that were removed from lands in this region to Western reservations, but to this day maintain connections to their original homelands. Some examples include the Stockbridge Munsee tribe, the Shawnee tribe, and others. Many other tribal nations and communities were taken in by Indigenous networks during colonization and are not recognized by the US federal or state governments. We implore every one of us to explore the rich story of Indigenous nations on every part of the landscape. This is a lifelong journey, and there are many resources to help us connect and learn about the richness, both in history and current day Indigenous presence. For example, Here in Amherst, Massachusetts, tribal nations not reflected in federal or state recognized designations include the Pecumtuck, Nonotuck, and Agawam. However, in this area, Native scholars, students, community members, elders, and youth from local, national, and international Indigenous nations continue a presence and community. In this area, the story of Indigenous presence and land stewardship continues, and regional tribal citizens, descendants, and allies keep a community that stewards the history, legacy, and active presence of Indigenous culture.
At the NECASC, and through our formal association with the United South and Eastern Tribes, we aim to support tribal stewardship and climate adaptation needs in the region. As a federal university consortium, we have a trust obligation to support these needs, as well as an opportunity to support tribal faculty and students and to develop educational opportunities to share the true history and current context of Indigenous stewardship. Through our activities, we are working to improve representation and connection with regional tribal nations, formally through our partnership with the College of the Menominee Nation, and going forward through a new partnership with the University of Maine's Native American programs. We are also investing in education and training of the Northeast CASC principal investigators, fellows, and funded researchers on tribal nation histories, context, and ethical collaboration. We also seek to build research capacity with and within tribal nations to provide technical support, student training, and educational opportunities. And finally, we're providing informational support for new and existing tribal climate adaptation plans, for example, through engagement in the USET Tribal Climate Writing Retreat and the USET Tribal Climate Camp. Looking forward, we will be drafting an engagement strategy to guide our work with Indigenous First Nation communities. The strategy will include goals to further increase engagement with tribal partners and academic programs throughout the region, increase Native student engagement, recruitment, and retention through programs like BIA Pathways and the Sloan Foundation, and by building our own outreach. We'll also expand on our efforts to match the science needs of tribal nations and the research capacity of the Northeast CASC. And finally, we will continue our learning journey to recognize that every place on the landscape has a larger context, and it is our responsibility to educate ourselves on that context and share it with our community. And now I'll hand it back to Bethany to continue the introductory session.
Thanks, Katherine and John and Casey for the land acknowledgement. So in the remainder of this opening talk, Katherine and I are really excited to showcase some of the great stakeholder-driven science that's happening within our network. And we also want to highlight some ideas for future directions. We're looking forward to your feedback on ongoing work and your input on next steps that we should be taking. So let's start by talking about building partnerships to solve ecological problems. So rapid changes that are happening right now really necessitate informed action. Climate change is the greatest challenge facing this generation and probably many generations to come. Climate change is happening really fast, which means that ecosystems have to adapt quickly. And fortunately, we have the means to help that process of climate adaptation. So science can create solutions, but it can only create solutions if we're working together, partnering science and management to actually test and implement those solutions. And scientists often take what we refer to as a loading dock approach to delivering science, certainly something that I'm guilty of, which means that we're doing something that a scientist thinks of as applied, but without necessarily input from managers, publish it in a paper and sort of say, all right, my job here is done. Someone's going to come and find this information. And unfortunately, that's not the way that engaged science actually works. So we miss an opportunity there to have input at the beginning on critical science needs. And we also miss an opportunity to actually deliver the science at an endpoint. So here at NECASC, we use a very different model. Our mission statement, again, is delivering science to help fish, wildlife, ecosystems, and cultural resources adapt to a changing climate. And our goal is to give everyone a voice so that we can identify critical challenges for climate adaptation and then solve them together. That means that our focus is on stakeholder-driven, actionable science, and not just on sort of classic applied science. We're committed to engagement as well as to that great science. So that is engaged science that serves existing partners and new partners. So hopefully some new partners in the audience today. We also have a core value of training that next generation of climate adaptation scientists. So not only training them in the best science practices, but also instilling these values of partnership and engagement. CASC is a federal academic partnership. So the USGS brings lots of research expertise as well as connections and insights from federal and state partners who advise us on science. And the academic institutions broaden that pool of research expertise, also bring additional outside partnerships and bring those exciting opportunities to train future scientists. And these broad partnerships we think are really nicely represented at this meeting. So this is a pie chart showing affiliations of everyone who registered. We have over 600 folks registered for this meeting, and you can see that we come from, those broad institutions, academic institutions, state and federal agencies, NGOs, tribal nations, and a bunch of you all who haven't yet picked a side, I think. So we're really glad to have all of you participating in the CASC network. A big part of engaged research, as we've mentioned before, is training that next generation of climate adaptation scientists. We have 39 current graduate and postdoctoral fellows, and we've trained over 100 fellows since we started just under a decade ago. Our fellows program includes training in stakeholder engagement. It includes training in climate communication, in ethical collaboration, and in professional development or career preparedness. And it's also an opportunity for the fellows to learn about a range of sciences. They come from a breadth of scientific backgrounds. So we're really proud of this next generation of climate adaptation scientists. And just to give you a little bit more flavor from our fellows, here are some quotes from some current and past graduate student fellows. So Nigel said that working with CASC helped him to engage with local conservation practitioners to develop capacity. Megna said, as a DEIJ fellow, so that's a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice fellow, she worked to develop programs to foster an inclusive environment and engage in DEIJ issues. And Jessica said that she's learned a lot by connecting with other graduate researchers and hearing about their successes and challenges. So these are some good examples of fellows working on stakeholder engagement, engaging in peer mentoring, and building up our work on the DEIJ, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Just continuing on the topic of diversity in climate adaptation science, we know at CASC, and I think many or all of our institutions, that we have a lot of work to do. But we're committed to doing that work to make it possible for all people to become climate adaptation scientists and to ensure that our science engages all people. This slide outlines some of the actions that we've taken. So first at the top, we have been supporting graduate fellows to build our DEIJ capacity. And our graduate fellows have focused on projects, including original research on climate adaptation justice, including surveying and then evaluating the current status of the CASC community to make us more inclusive, and including building bridges to minority serving institutions. Second, we've been learning from experts. So we led a course on Indigenous knowledge and climate adaptation science. And that course engaged environmental coordinators, scholars, and elders from tribal nations to learn about examples of indigenous climate adaptation science and explore models for collaborating using diverse knowledges in scientific research. And then lastly, we're excited that beginning next year, we'll be participating in a new training program that's called Climate Adaptation Scientists of Tomorrow. For this, the University of Massachusetts is partnering with the USGS to bring undergraduates from minority serving institutions to UMass to engage in climate adaptation research and participate in peer and near peer mentoring programs. A couple of things have changed in the last year for any CASC. First, we said farewell just last month to Rick Palmer, Rick was the founding university director and led us for almost a decade. And his vision for the center is really reflected in all that we're talking about today, and this commitment to engage science, in our interdisciplinary fellows program and our collaborative team. And all of his leadership, as well as a heck of a lot of work, brought us to where we are today. So John and I are doing our best to live up to the standards that Rick established. Second, just over a year ago, we welcomed Katherine Smith as our new federal director. And Katherine and all of us have really benefited from the leadership and effort of past federal director, Mary Ratnaswamy, and past interim federal directors, Olivia Ledee and David Reed-Miller. So thanks to everyone who's come before. Another big change this year is a change in our footprint. So you can see that sort of circled in the red here was the former Northeast region within the CASC network. And at the beginning of this month, the USGS officially announced the creation of a 9th Climate Adaptation Science Center in the Midwest. So that sort of like dark blue color in the middle. The Midwest CASC is hosted by the University of Minnesota. And this change is really exciting for the Northeast. We feel like it's bringing us down to our fighting weight, which I wish I could say the same after the last year and a half. So we see this as a chance really to be more focused on the needs of, maybe a core Northeast region. But through that extended partnership with a lot of great people and institutions in the Midwest, we had the pleasure of partnering with a number of fantastic scientists, so pictured here. All of these scientists have a commitment to stakeholder engaged science and to mentoring that next generation of climate adaptation students and scientists. And the good news is that many of these folks are partners in the new Midwest CASC footprint. So we're really happy to report that much of the work that was initiated when they were part of the Northeast will continue as part of the Midwest. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our science. You're going to see lots more of that today and tomorrow. So this slide shows our previous and current science priorities. We've had a large focus on understanding vulnerability to climate change and how climate change affects different ecosystems, target species, and natural and cultural resources. And the word cloud on the right is from the titles of projects funded over the past 3 years. It's supposed to be a tree, but it's kind of missing its top. I think we just have too many really long words, so we can quite get the top of the tree. In addition to these science projects, sort of verbally portrayed here, we've also convened scientists and managers on a number of issues. So those include understanding biological thresholds, a workshop that we did a year ago, and some of you may have attended. We had a workshop a couple of years ago on climate smart invasive species management. And as Casey and Katherine mentioned before, we've also provided technical assistance for groups such as the USET hosted Tribal Climate Camp and writing retreats. And so collectively, these activities help to ensure that climate adaptation science gets out and reaches the folks who need it. So I just want to go through a few more examples of some of the engaged science that we're doing. A first example is our work to build sustainable forested habitats in the context of climate change, as well as invasive insects and diseases. So this work includes a whole bunch of large-scale co-produced forest adaptation experiments. And these experiments were developed in collaboration with forest and wildlife managers. The experiments are studying the response of multiple species, so including ash trees, to different adaptation strategies. And the goal is to find effective strategies that we can then apply more broadly. And in Tyler Everett's words, brown ash is deeply rooted in the culture of tribal nations in the Northeast. Adaptation strategies supported by any CASC help our effort to sustain brown ash and our culture. Another example is our work assessing coastal hazards. So the picture on the right shows some of the dangers associated with the combination of sea level rise and storm surge for both people, as illustrated here, but also for all of our coastal ecosystems. And work at UMass in collaboration with the Climate Ready Boston initiative has developed flood projections for our coasts in collaboration with coastal planners. And in graduate fellow Hannah Baranis's words, learning about co-production while an CASC fellow has motivated me to focus my postgraduate career on science that serves community needs. A third example is our work building broad partnerships, in this case of invasive species scientists and managers, so that we can exchange information and respond swiftly to any needs of managers that arise. So through CASC, we initiated the Northeast Regional Invasive Species and Climate Change, or RISC, the Risk Management Network. And one project of the RISC network is focused on sharing invasive plant risk assessments across states to help inform more climate proactive lists of prohibited plants. So, essentially trying to help states figure out what's coming next. And in Julie Richburg's words, invasive plants don't respect political boundaries. Their ability to move across state lines makes coordinated regional dialogue and planning for climate change a necessity. Another CASC project focuses on mapping refugia. So refugia are habitats that are buffered from climate change. Ongoing conversations between scientists and managers have resulted in maps of refugia for over 50 priority plant and animal species. And that information has been implemented in conservation action plans to protect those refuges. And in Abe Miller-Rushing's words, CASC helped us develop plans to manage refugia in our broader climate adaptation strategy. Their expertise helped to translate science into management. And then a final example focuses on adapting and restoring cultural resources. And CASC supported collaboration between UMass and the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead is looking at the effects of climate change on subsistence fisheries with a focus on river herring and American eel. And the project includes looking at the effectiveness of restoration efforts with an ultimate goal of reopening a tribal fishery. In grad fellow Asha Ajmani's words, support from the CASC has allowed me to deepen relationships with tribal nations and to collaborate with them on projects related to access to subsistence and cultural resources in light of climate change. So those were all examples of our ongoing work. And now I'm going to turn it over to Katherine to talk about where we're headed in the future. Katherine?
All right. So thanks, Bethany, for that excellent summary of the work and achievements of the Northeast CASC, from informing climate adaptation on the ground to training the next generation of scientists to meet the challenge ahead. So despite the changes in leadership that Bethany mentioned, Northeast CASC staff have sought input from managers and partners to inform our research agenda over the past few years through a variety of groups and forums. And these include our Stakeholder Advisory Committee, last year's strategic planning focus groups, and workshops such as the Thresholds Workshop and the USET Tribal Climate Camp that Bethany mentioned, Northeast Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency committees, as well as an assessment of our partners' strategic plans in the region. So in these conversations, we sought to understand climate adaptation science needs in the region and to shape a research agenda that meets the challenges of the future. We're also working to quickly grow and adapt to the unprecedented interest in climate adaptation science. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to share a bit about what we've heard through these listening sessions and how we've translated that input into draft science themes that will guide our work for the next 5 years. So looking at what's changed since we developed our first strategic plan, first, we've grown a lot of collaborations and partnerships that allow us to more narrowly focus on our mission of delivering science to help fish, wildlife, habitats, and cultural resources adapt to a changing climate. For example, working more closely with NOAA on climate projections and drought. And in addition, our new, smaller, some might say more reasonable footprint provides more resources to invest in the Northeast and also to cover subregions such as the Mid-Atlantic, where we've only been able to make limited investments in the past. And finally, we've made considerable progress in many parts of our first strategic science agenda. For example, in understanding impacts on species and ecosystems and translating that information into climate vulnerability assessments covering much of the Northeast. However, there are many parts of our first strategic science agenda where we've just begun to address the depth and breadth of information needs, for example, around cultural resources and around decision frameworks. And so looking to our next 5-year strategic science strategy, we aim to continue collaborating with and building out the strengths of our partners, such as climate hubs and NOAA climate programs and many others. We also plan to focus on our unique niche of providing actionable science to help managers and stewards of wildlife, fish, habitat, and cultural resources adapt to a changing climate. And we want to keep building off our advances. For example, continuing to study climate impacts while also increasing understanding of the complex interactions between climate and other stressors. And we also plan to address emerging needs around evaluating the effectiveness of adaptation strategies, including socioeconomic factors, and informing landscape conservation design. So in the next few minutes, I'll talk about each of our 4 draft science themes in more detail. And I'll also encourage anyone who's interested in reading about these in more detail to see the link in the chat. So this link will take you to a Google form where you can weigh in on which themes and related research activities are higher priorities to you, and also share any information needs we might have missed. So our first theme continues our current work to understand and predict the impact of climate change on species of concern, both culturally and economically important species, regional species of greatest conservation need, and species and ecosystems that were identified in our focus groups as being understudied. We also aim to support research that looks at the interactive and also often compounding effects of multiple stressors, such as wildlife disease, invasive species, and climate change. Another example of work in this theme is recognizing that most natural areas in the Northeast have developed climate change vulnerability assessments. We aim to address both gaps in the existing network of climate change vulnerability assessments, for example, supporting some tribal climate change vulnerability assessments, as well as to support development of next generation, finer scale, more interactive climate change vulnerability assessments in the region. And again, please see the link in the chat for more details on activities under this theme and to provide input on this theme and the activities we've discussed. So our second theme involves actively developing and evaluating climate adaptation strategies, including piloting new adaptation strategies, evaluating the effectiveness and transferability of existing strategies, understanding the challenges of moving from local to regional applications of adaptation strategies, and evaluating the efficacy of broad climate adaptation strategies for data deficient regional species of greatest conservation need. In our third theme, we're going to focus on increasing understanding of social, cultural, and economic considerations and assessing climate impacts and developing adaptation strategies. Some activities under this theme include assessing cultural resources threatened by climate change and developing adaptation strategies for these resources, understanding the values, perceptions around future ecosystem configurations in a changing climate, determining the social acceptability, cost effectiveness, trade-offs, and benefits of various adaptation actions, and increasing the use of traditional ecological knowledge and community-based participatory research approaches. And our last draft theme is focused on informing landscape scale conservation in a changing climate. Some activities under this theme include advancing understanding of habitat quality, species migration, habitat corridors, connectivity, and climate refugia across the Northeast. Looking beyond protected areas and evaluating the potential role of working lands and urban and urbanizing habitat and regional conservation and adaptation strategies. Advancing decision support tools and resources to inform landscape scale adaptation strategies, and expanding the exchange of data and knowledge across political boundaries. And again, this was a quick summary of each theme, and we're sharing a work in progress. We'll be seeking more feedback before we finalize the strategy early next year. But again, more details on each theme and an opportunity for feedback are available through the link posted in the chat. So in addition to outlining the science priorities that will guide our work for the next 5 years, we're also evaluating how we work to achieve our mission and our values as the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. So to summarize these guiding principles, we will continue to focus on the grand challenges facing managers, producing actionable science, and utilizing co-production approaches while supporting cutting-edge innovative science. We also aim to have an impact beyond the sum of our work through making information more easily accessible. For example, by investing in synthesis and data visualization and supporting sharing of knowledge through trainings, workshops, convenings, as well as by building and supporting networks and communities of practice. Finally, we want to continue to support positive change by continuing to excel in student education and workforce development, following best practices and leading in best practices in diversity, equity, and inclusion, from our fellows program to the research we fund to our partnerships, and continuing to develop new partnerships with tribal organizations to meet our trust obligations and to support tribal climate adaptation. Last but not least, the Northeast CASC is a partnership, and we're most effective partnering with others towards our shared goal of a resilient Northeast. So thank you very much for your time and your attention and your participation this week. Again, we'll appreciate your feedback on the draft science themes, and if you want to read more detail than I was able to provide here, just please see that link in the chat. And to learn more about recent and some of our partners' research on the topics we covered this morning, please stay tuned for the rest of our program today and tomorrow. Looking ahead for today, we have a short break, and then please come back and join us at 10 for our management panel. And this panel will set the context for management challenges we face in the Northeast as we adapt to a changing climate. And then after the management panel, we're going to break into 2 concurrent sessions, cumulative and interactive threats, and vulnerability and needs assessment for key resources. And then after lunch, it's a very long lunch/Zoom break. Please come back for our other 2 concurrent sessions, building adaptive capacity and landscape scale conservation. And then for the last event of today, we're going to break into our interactive workshops with 3 concurrent workshops to choose from: adaptation strategies from frameworks to adaptation, landscape scale conservation design, and future of aquatic flows. And then please join us back tomorrow morning at 9:30 for our keynote speaker, Dr. Kelsey Leonard, followed by our climate adaptation justice panel at 10:45. And then in the afternoon, we'll have our 3 final workshops starting at 2 p.m., integrating social and cultural concerns with biophysical science, linking science and management, and integrating climate information into regional fish and wildlife planning. And then to close out our workshop tomorrow, or our symposium tomorrow, we'll have an interactive session starting at 3:45 designed to build new collaborations among symposium participants. And with that overview, thanks again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you back here at 10 to hear from our outstanding thought leaders around management challenges in the Northeast.